Hey there, this is Jamie.Pelaez, and it's day number 13 of my 90-day vlog challenge. I just got off a really awesome call called the Empower Hour. If you don't know about it, I'll leave details below this video, and also make sure that you join our mailing list because we will update you on the next call. But just to give you a brief little update, it's every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tonight they were talking about three things you can do right now to guarantee your success. Three things. Seems pretty simple, right? So what was really cool about tonight was the subject had a lot to do with what I was talking about yesterday, about the whole childlike thing, but it looked at it from a different viewpoint, okay? And I'll explain that in a moment. So the speaker, Tony, was talking about how adults generally don't give ourselves passes, or like I like to say, we don't give ourselves enough grace like we would do a child. So for instance, if a child is learning a new skill, or like soccer or gymnastics or an instrument or whatever the case may be, even walking, right? You expect them to run into some obstacles. You expect them to not be like, super amazingly awesome at it first. You expect them to have to commit to it. You encourage them to commit to do better and try again. And he used the example of, a child being gymnastics. And like, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, you're not like, Susie Q or whatever, who's been doing it for like 5 years and you just got started. Like, you wouldn't compare your child or another child that just got started to someone that's obviously been doing this for a long time, right? But as adults, we tend to do these things, right? We tend to compare ourselves to others. Now, comparing yourself is not a bad thing when you're comparing yourself with yourself. For instance, you just learn a new skill and you've conquered one aspect of that skill. Like maybe you play guitar and you learn to play your first song. Well, before you can play anything, right? And now you can play a song. So that would be a good thing to say, well, now, compared to when I just got started, look how far I've come. Compare yourself to yourself. But when you compare yourself to others, you tend to hurt yourself a lot. A lot of negative things can happen. For instance, we have a person that made $1 million in our business the first month. Quick income disclaimer, I can't guarantee that you'll make a cent or anything. But a lot of people, will look at that and they will compare themselves to that person and say, well, I've been in it 6 months and I haven't even made $1 million. Or, I didn't even make a cent my first month, or whatever the case may be. But they don't realize that person had skills prior to that they have refined and conquered and done well with beforehand that enabled them to create that $1 million. It wasn't that they were completely a newbie, had no skills whatsoever, and came in and created that $1 million. So a lot of times people compare themselves to people that they don't even know their backstory. So just in general, don't compare yourself to others. It's not a healthy habit, for the most part. I can't even think of a good example where it would be a healthy one unless you were like, I admire, so-and-so because they have this quality and I have that quality too. I guess that would be a good example. But for the most part, when we compare ourselves to others, it's negative. And we don't want that. We want to cut out the negative, okay? Number 2 was consistently showing up, okay? So an example, of a child, if they were just learning to play guitar, well, you would encourage them to continue to get their lessons right, to continue to show up, to continue to practice. You wouldn't, say, oh, look, you tried one time and it didn't work out. You didn't learn how to master the guitar overnight. Oh, well, let's move on to something else. No, you would encourage them to try again. So in your business or anything, if you're learning a new hobby or a new skill of any sort, show up. Be committed to showing up. Be committed to doing what it takes to get it done. Be committed to practicing. Be committed to learning. Because when you become committed to that, that's when you can truly start to master a skill or anything, a business or whatever the case. But if you're not committed to it, if you think that you can, learn to play guitar overnight, it's not going to happen. Or Well, maybe unless you're like some really super duper genius prodigy or something. Okay, maybe. But for the majority, that's just not going to happen. So there's a lot of people that get started in online, marketing and internet marketing and affiliate marketing. And if they don't see results right away, they give up because they're not committed. Okay? I'm sorry, but you didn't learn to walk in one day. You didn't learn to crawl in one day. You started like wiggling and scooting and stuff, and eventually, you got to the crawl, and then, the walk was kind of wobbly and you'd fall down and whatever, but eventually you can walk, okay? Same with your, writing ability. Your writing, some people's, well, this is probably a poor example, but, at first, you probably were not so good at writing, and then you improved. I think everyone's improved some. I was going to say, probably looked at like chicken scratch at first, but I know some people that are older than me that their stuff looks like chicken scratch, so that's a bad example. But the point is, you didn't know how to write at first at all, but then you learned, right? Or, for those of us that are blessed with being able to speak, you didn't know how to speak right away, right? But you eventually learned it and you eventually mastered it at some point in time. But why was that? Because there was a commitment and you kept practicing and you kept utilizing that. So, for instance, Tony was talking about he decided to get this really amazing camera and he wanted to learn how to become a better photographer. And he realized, well, if I'm going to do it, then I need to bring this camera with me wherever I go. So I can practice, shooting in different scenes and weather and lighting and so on and so forth, so he can become better. Okay? So be committed, okay? Be committed to making it happen. Be committed to your training. Be committed to, going to your seminars or whatever the case may be. Be committed to practicing. Be committed to utilizing it. So those were the first two, right? So we had don't compare yourself to others, okay? And be committed. Be committed to showing up, okay? And then the third one was have persistence, right? Have persistence because you're going to what? Have obstacles. So, no, I'm not being negative. I'm not saying that there's going to be a ton of obstacles, but there's going to be some kind of obstacles. Somewhere, somehow, it's going to happen, okay? Prime example, talking about, a child learning to crawl and then walk. There's going to be obstacles that kid is going to have to overcome. They're going to have to face. And if they just give up, right, and they're not willing to, persevere over that, well, what's going to happen? They wouldn't learn how to walk, or they wouldn't learn how to, talk and all those different things. So it's the same thing in anything that you want to learn how to do or that you want to do in general. You have to have persistence, and you have to be aware that there are going to be some trials and tribulations somewhere down the road. That's not being negative, that's being realistic. But you need to decide right here, right now, how are you going to handle those trials and tribulations? How are you going to handle those bumps in the road? Are you just going to throw a hissy fit and give up and throw in the towel? Or are you going to decide that when those things come, that you will overcome them, you will look for the solutions, and that you're not going to give up? There was a quote that he said by a man named Andy. I didn't catch the last name, but he said, persistence without exception. Choose to be persistent without exception, meaning no matter what happens, choose to be persistent. If your goal is to make $10,000 a month, then be persistent until you make that $10,000 a month. If you're, wanting to, be like Tony and learn how to become a better photographer, be persistent until you become a better photographer. You want to learn how to play guitar, be consistent until you learn to play guitar. So you have to be committed to show up. You have to be persistent, and you can't compare yourself to others. You can't go, well, I don't play as great a guitar as Santana, who's been, I don't even know, well on the guitar for I don't even know how many years, okay? Insane amount of years. You can't compare yourself to Santana. I mean, you can, but it's not a good idea, okay? Why? Because he's got way more skill than you in the guitar. And so you don't need to do that. And he started somewhere as well. And in the first place you start is what? Taking your first steps towards whatever that goal is. So those are the three things that you need to keep in mind so you can have success. Don't compare yourself to others. Be committed to showing up, and then be persistent. Be persistent to the end of whatever that goal is. Be persistent without exception. Be willing to put in the effort, to go that extra mile. You do those 3 things, you've guaranteed your success. I hope you liked it. Be childlike in everything except for, being immature. We don't want none of that. But be childlike in your faith, be childlike in your play, and be childlike in forgiving yourself and giving yourself the grace to know that you can't know everything all at once. You're probably never going to know everything, and that it's okay to fail. It's okay to run into obstacles. It's not okay to compare yourself to others. It's okay to fail. It's what you do with failure that matters. Are you going to learn from the lesson, or are you going to keep failing? It's your choice. It's always your choice. All right, that's all I have for you tonight. Comment below. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye for now.